Hello, everyone, and welcome back into BVM Sports Chalk Talk. I'm Lucas Semb here with Scott Procter and Matt Morris, and we do the show today with the Milwaukee Bucks as NBA champions for the first time in 50 years. Half a century of agony and owning the future has finally been completed, and Bucks fans have been paid off in the best possible way. Scott, you've been documented all year long, giving the Bucks no chance. You know, you had them losing in the opening round of the playoffs, predicted a Nets series loss, a Suns series loss. So let's hear from you first with the Bucks having taken care of business. Let's hear your reactions on what we all witnessed.
For sure. First off, congratulations to Milwaukee Bucks. Congratulations to both of you, Matt and Luke, as Wisconsin natives and Bucks fans, especially, you, Luke, kudos to you for telling us all year that a Bucks title would be the outcome of this season. Listen, I'm genuinely happy for Giannis Antetokounmpo and the city of Milwaukee for a handful of reasons. The main one being that back in December, I sat here on this very show in December and said that Giannis made a grave mistake signing a supermax with the Milwaukee Bucks. And it wasn't because I didn't believe Giannis was capable of reaching this level, but I didn't believe the franchise could help him get there. And I was proven to be dead wrong, like I have been about this team all season, as Luke alluded to at the Open. I picked them to lose round one versus Miami. I picked the Milwaukee Bucks to lose to Brooklyn in round two, although injuries to Kyrie Irving and James Harden impacted that. But we won't talk about that today. I actually did expect the Milwaukee Bucks to, outlast the Atlanta Hawks in the Eastern Conference Finals. But as you all know, the Suns were my pick to win these NBA Finals. Giannis Antetokounmpo somehow found another gear on basketball's biggest stage. And like I tweeted last night, this championship run, one that I did not see coming, is the most impressive since LeBron and the Cavs 3-1 comeback in 2016, mainly because of the Greek Freak. His worst game of the finals was a 20-17 game in game one, his first game back after almost destroying his knee just a week and a half prior. He then went 40-piece, an all-time block in game four, an all-time alley-oop in game five, and then obviously a 50-burger, and arguably the greatest finals closeout game we've seen from a player in NBA history. I said last week that the things he was doing was the stuff of legends. Giannis is a legend already, period. The first player ever with 50, 10, and 5 blocks in a finals game, the 2 MVPs, the Defensive Player of the Year, the championship, the finals MVP at 26 years old is almost unfathomable. Congrats to Giannis, the Bucks, their fans, and the city of Milwaukee.
Absolutely, Scott, and the most improved player as well. I mean, that's I think even more adds more to all of this is that Giannis going in. I can remember when the Bucks drafted him, and there was comparisons. He's kind of Kevin Durant because he's lanky, but he plays a little bit like a guard, possible power forward. To see his development and just get to a level that no one ever, except some Bucks fans believed, and as soon as you started to see it, you really started to believe in it. To get to this point where you're talking about a guy who dropped 40, and 50 in the finals to help carry his team to a championship it's unbelievable. And Luke, you were clearly ahead of your time a little bit with the decision to say top 10 all time. I obviously was trying to be a little unbiased and be a little neutral in that argument. You can't argue it anymore. I'm happy to take the L on that argument and give you the credit for being a little ahead of your time with that one. What he did, and not just on the court, but off the court, with some unbelievable press conference, quotes, both, funny, where you're laughing and you just enjoy him, and then also just very inspirational and getting to see what his mentality is and how he had his outlook on not just basketball and his career, but life in general it's a finals run that even if you're not a Phoenix Suns fan or a Bucks fan, you can just appreciate the great basketball and the great history that was made. And if anyone notices my voice is a little off, it's because I was down, as most of us were, in the Deer District, screaming my head off as it happened. And it really was just unbelievable. And also a team effort where you can look at all these athletes and players on the Bucks and point out moments where they came up big, whether it was game 6 or game 1. At some point, everyone had a moment. And I think that was also what was so much fun about this Bucks run.
Absolutely. And Scott, kudos to you for putting your pride aside and giving Milwaukee the love they deserve. Everyone appreciates it. I thank both of you for giving me the credit I deserve for making a couple of calls early on, but my initial reaction here is just happiness. And being a Bucks fan, like Scott alluded to, we've been waiting so long for this moment. At 15 and 67, that season, I was a season ticket holder, and I went to every single game, and it was just pure torture. But I loved it. I loved the city. I loved the stadium, the old Bradley Center, the players, and now to be here and see this doesn't even seem real. It still hasn't really even hit me. So when they won that game last night, I'm down there in the Deer District, and I stood on a street corner for probably an hour, and I didn't move. I was just watching the fireworks and people climbing light poles, and it was everything that you had expected a city to do when a 50-year skid has been broken. So it was an unbelievable moment for me personally, and for the city, and for the players. There's no more deserving of a group than these guys. And it was unbelievable. They were the better team in the series, and they did it the right way, like Giannis mentioned and keeps mentioning, homegrown. He's stuck there. He could have gone to a super team. He had his options. Who wouldn't want Giannis there? But he stayed, and he won it, and he built guys around him. And he's probably going to stay here in my case, or what I think, probably the rest of his career. And I think people are going to come to Milwaukee, and I think we're going to see that become more of a thing. But homegrown, him and Middleton, 8.5 years in the making. They added some nice pieces, PJ Tucker, Bobby Portis, and Bryn Forbes. I'm just thinking of these guys off the top of my head, guys who came in and bought into the system. They made Bud shine, and he was a guy who I have to say sorry to, because I personally tore him apart on this show, on a podcast. I didn't think he was the right guy for the job, and he absolutely is. And these players helped him. They bought into his system. They bought into the city and the fans, the way they communicated with the city. It just seemed that there was something special in the air this year, and you could feel it. And they finally sealed the deal. So it's a heck of a thing to see, and I'm so appreciative of it. And now a couple weeks ago, I proclaimed Giannis top 10 all time. I got a lot of crazy looks from people and comments, and this panel, we said we'd discuss it if he won the ring. Well, how about on top of the ring, he had a game-winning block, that game-winning alley-oop, poster dunk on Chris Paul on the road, and a 50-piece McNugget in a close-em-out game. Scott, I want to hear from you first, because we kind of heard Matt say he agrees at this point. Let's discuss it. Where do you stand now in terms of Giannis top 10 all time?
Yeah, it's like I said last week, Luke, I'm willing to entertain the conversation now at this point. It's impossible not to. I do have to say that I'm not willing to put him in the top 10 at this point, just off the fact that I don't believe there's any top 10 player in NBA history who only has one ring. But, with that being said, I have to admit, I can't, and I'm struggling with my words right now because this is tough for me to honestly say, but I honestly don't think this is Giannis Antetokounmpo's final championship. And with that being said, he has one, maybe two more. There's no doubt that, when it's all said and done, that he will be perhaps a top 5, for sure, a top 10 player all time, again, with those multiple rings. And again, I mentioned earlier, his resume already at this point at 26 years old is something nobody other than maybe one or two guys have ever done. And those one or two guys are, solidified top players to ever, dribble a basketball. So, with that being said, I'm not willing to go top 10 just yet, but, if I'm forced to place him, on the all-time hierarchy, he's surely at this point a top, inside of 20, around the 15 to 17 player all time. And that's just scary to say, somebody who's 26 years old, in the middle of their prime, coming off their first championship. And again, this is another thing, this has been, kind of a trend throughout NBA history. Once superstars get their first ring, it kind of unlocks something in them, and even their teammates, if they're able to keep a core together. Again, that just goes back to my point that this probably isn't Giannis's final, story, in the sun, hoisting a Larry O'Brien. So we'll see.
Yeah, I want to expand upon what I said, top 10 all time. I full-fledged believe that right now, but I think when his career is all said and done, I think Giannis will be in the GOAT debate. Because when you look at the way that he's doing things, he's obviously going to need to win more titles, and we will talk about this in a little bit. I think he will. But the way that he was hitting those turnaround jumpers all series long and just getting to the rim at will, like he asserted himself. He can do this every game. He did it at the highest stage. He can do this against every team, every matchup that he gets, every time. If he is ever able to develop that jump shot, that three-point jump shot at a consistent clip. LeBron wasn't a good shooter until later in his career. He lost a little bit of athleticism, a little bit of a step. He was obviously, granted, a better shooter than, Giannis is right now comparatively at their age. But LeBron didn't really develop that till late in his career. If Giannis can do that, he will be literally unguardable. And I don't think ever we've seen a player do what he does on both ends of the floor before at that high of a rate, besides LeBron. Maybe Hakeem Olajuwon, but Hakeem wasn't the scorer that Giannis is, in my opinion, down low. Maybe Shaq, but I think Giannis might even be a little bit of a defender than Shaq.
You have to include Jordan in that debate as well in terms of all-time great defenders. He was a multiple 6+ time all-NBA.
And the only reason I didn't is just because their defense was different. Jordan was kind of a lock them up, get your steals in your face guy. Giannis is, he's more of an anchor down the paint type defender.
I got you.
But that's the only reason I don't bring that up. But he is up there in the GOAT debate when it's all said and done, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he is, I think, definitely top 10. I respect your opinion, Scott. And the thing about the beauty of NBA, the beauty of being diehard fans as we are, is we understand and appreciate all the greatness that has come through. And we're just witnessing it right now with Giannis. And I might be, like Luke, I am a little biased. I'm a Bucks fan. I enjoy every moment of watching him play. I never, doubted or wanted to listen to any of his anybody who said something negative about his game. But also, the exciting thing, because we've been sort of pointing towards the future, his mentality, I mean, to go out and after someone, I'm not going to name names, mentions how everyone knows he's going to miss the free throw, and then go out and only miss 2 and kind of ice the game.
Names. That was Chris Paul.
Yeah, it was Chris Paul. Just ice the game with free throws and look so unbelievable from the line. It's that mentality of, if someone's going to call him out on something, he's not going to take that. And the next game, he's going to dominate you in that way to prove a point. And so he has that sort of that Jordan mentality, that Kobe mentality. And the way that he went about these finals, I think that the dominance and just the freak of nature that he is really pushes him up to that top 10 for me. And Luke, I agree with you. I mean, if this stays on, and Scott kind of alluded to it as well, the future is bright. And we're going to dive deep into the future of the Bucks. But if he continues on this path, because he's so young and there's so much left of his career, you almost want to just not get too ahead of yourselves because you want to be able to just enjoy it. I think he absolutely could be in the GOAT debate as we look, 4 years down the road.
Absolutely. And to get there, he's going to have to win some more titles. We all agree. But could the Milwaukee Bucks be the next NBA dynasty? We saw years of the Cavs and the Warriors in the finals, true dominance year after year. Could the Bucks be one of those perennial finals appearance teams with the big three of Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, and Giannis Antetokounmpo locked in together for the next 3 seasons? Scott, let's start with you.
I believe you have to say that that's the case. It's certainly on the table. And again, I think the biggest reason is, Luke, something that you just mentioned and talked about a bit at length, that Giannis, we can only really expect him to get better, which is scary. You mentioned the turnaround jumpers. That is something that I hadn't seen before this postseason, and it looks repeatable. And again, if he continues to improve that, continues to improve from the free throw line, gets to a respectable clip from the 3-point range around 35%. I mean, that's really all it takes, because again, as we know, the NBA is a player-driven league, especially a superstar-driven league. When the head of your snake is Giannis Antetokounmpo and is so light years ahead or better than, an opposing team's best player, like was the case in these NBA finals, you're going to have a chance to not only, appear in the finals, especially when you play in the Eastern Conference, but you're going to have a great chance to win it all. And again, as long as Chris Middleton and, Drew Holiday, just continue to buy into that mentality of, that the Bucks, that Giannis has, kind of brought to the city of Milwaukee, there's no doubt that they should certainly be legitimate title contenders for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think they have to be. And I think, to your point, Luke, and also Scott, when you see these teams kind of go through the levels, where if you look at the Bucks over the last 6 or so years, they went from a non-contender to a playoff contender to an Eastern Conference Finals contender to a title contender. And you just see them go through those levels, and you've seen great teams do that before. You know, Chicago had to do that. Detroit had to do, like, all these great teams in the past, they've done that. And so I think that right off the bat shows you that now that they've gotten over that hump and they know what it takes to win a title, and I think they'll be able to keep the core, not just, you know, Drew and Chris and Giannis, but also I think Bobby stays around. I think they add guys who want to go and chase a ring with them. I think all of that adds to it. And besides just the team itself and the play and Giannis only improving, I think if you look just at the landscape that is the Eastern Conference right now, there's a lot of questions in Boston. There's a lot of questions in Philly. Atlanta looks like a young up and rising team, and I'm excited to see what they're able to do, but they got to answer the question of, are they going to be able to hang on to John Collins? And with Brooklyn, obviously you always have to give Brooklyn credit just by sheer star power alone. But we have really yet to see them play all together. And there's still questions as to whether they will be able to play all together just by the health standpoint alone. So absolutely, if you look at the next 3 years specifically, based on the contracts that the Bucks stars are on, I have no doubt that they're going to be a favorite, and they will be in the conversation every year. And just like with any, you know, title run, there's a little luck that gets thrown into it. So I won't be surprised if they're a dynasty and that they make the Eastern Conference Finals the next few years, and they make another finals appearance for sure.
I agree. And just simply because you can't bet against Giannis. Matt, you kind of mentioned it, but he's the type of guy who he's on social media. He sees what people are saying about him. And if you say something wrong to him, you're going to get proven wrong in the very next game. Mario Hezonja is one example I can think of. He kind of dunked on Giannis one game. Not really, but people called it getting dunked on, and Giannis just obliterated him the next time they play. This is the kind of thing, like, he sees what people are saying. He doesn't mention it, though, just keeps his head down, proves you wrong, and acts like he didn't know any better. That's just the kind of guy Giannis is. So I think they're absolutely going to have some more titles and be a dynasty. But every team needs his role players. And regardless of how good he is, and Chris and Drew, they're going to need those guys to re-sign, like Bobby Portis, a PJ Tucker, those guys who just played huge minutes off the bench for them. And it didn't always show up in the stat book, but they were huge. Bobby's energy, PJ's defense, his leadership, these guys all, without them, the Bucks don't win the championship this year. I can fully say that. I totally believe that with all my heart. But let's not forget, Dante DiVincenzo will be back, a starter on this team who didn't get to play all postseason long. They're only going to get better. And in free agency, which, by the way, starts in 12 days already, they're going to be able to attract some new guys. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of had two things I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on. One, since we're talking about the Bucks' future, where does Mike Budenholzer fit into that? Has he fallen completely into your guys' good graces? Is he back for sure for the long haul?
In my opinion, I'll go first, Matt. I think Budenholzer is here for the long haul. You don't win a title, and you know what? What's funny about that? I was telling people, even if the Bucks do win a title, Budenholzer's got to go because
That's why I asked. Yes, correct. Yes,
because I've seen enough. But he completely proved me wrong in the sense that it wasn't just the players who won this championship. He was making the adjustments. And one of the biggest adjustments was giving the ball to Chris Middleton in crunch time and letting him close out the game with some huge shots, putting trust in different guys instead of saying, here, Giannis, here's the ball, go do something with it. And it's the players buying into him. And I think the biggest thing is that the players responded to him. And that's the biggest thing. He has complete control of that locker room. He was starting to make adjustments, and it paid off. So I think he's going to get a long-term contract here, and he should be a part of those future plans.
Yeah, and to build off of that, Luke, I mean, you saw the buy-in because you noticed if you watched each series, they went with different personnel. Bobby Portis did not play barely at all in the Brooklyn series. And then since then, he's gotten a ton of minutes. He never got down on it. He was never upset about it. There's plenty of guys where if you as a coach don't have control and trust of that locker room, that's going to just, blow up in your face. So off of that, and then also – my biggest issue with Budenholzer was it always seemed like, regardless of the players and what you did out on the court, and there was plenty of stuff you could point out to the players, but it always sometimes felt like Budenholzer was getting out-coached by great coaches. Nick Nurse, Eric Spoelstra, just to name two that really stuck out in my mind. This year, that wasn't the case. I mean, whether it was Eric Spoelstra, Nate McMillan, Steve Nash, Monty Williams, who is a great coach as well. There was never an issue with the coaching as far as I considered. And when you win a championship, when you win it this way, when you continuously come back from, setbacks, whether it's Giannis getting injured or going down 2-0 to Brooklyn, going down 2-0 to Phoenix, the resiliency, obviously it stems from the coaching staff and it stems from Mike Budenholzer. So yes, absolutely. I think Budenholzer was the reason that the Bucks got into the title contender conversation. He's the reason they're winning a title now, and he'll continue to be that reason moving forward. You absolutely have to keep that coach.
One more question I wanted to get you guys' thoughts on before we move on. We spent, obviously most of this show talking about the Milwaukee Bucks, and rightfully so, but, they did play a team in those NBA finals, and I kind of wanted to get you guys' thoughts on the Suns on two things, really. You guys can go whatever route you want to, but was this Chris Paul, after 16 years in the league, was this his last best chance of winning his first NBA title? And kind of within that, do you envision the Suns being able to be back on this stage? I know Kendrick Perkins mentioned after game 2 of these NBA finals that he can see the Phoenix Suns becoming, the dynasty that we're talking about, the Milwaukee Bucks possibly becoming. So what do you make of Chris Paul's future? And, in turn, what do you make of the Suns' future? And obviously they outperformed what everybody thought they would do this season. So where do you kind of see their future headed?
Sure. My answer to that would be, I kind of one answer kind of answers both questions, but I do not think that the Suns will be back here at this stage. I think Devin Booker is a great player, but I don't think he's ever going to be Giannis level type player. And the rest of the core around him is not going to get them back to that finals. That's what I'm going to say there. And I think they could get back with Chris Paul. And that's where my other point goes here now. I don't think they'll get back because Chris Paul will not be there. I've heard rumors, Chris Paul going to the Lakers. And so that answers your question. No, this is not going to be Chris Paul's last chance to win a championship, because if he goes to play and join LeBron and join Anthony Davis, that's going to be trouble. But I don't think it's going to be his last chance. I think it will be the Suns' last chance for an indefinite amount of time.
Okay.
With Chris Paul, I think he'll get another, but it could come by way of, trying to get LeBron to get him one. And it's sad if it comes down to that.
Okay.
I honestly don't know if Chris Paul will stay with the Suns or if he'll go to someone like the Lakers. I also hear that the Lakers are interested in Russell Westbrook. So that's not the only point guard they're looking at. Obviously, the relationship between LeBron and Chris would suggest that they might want to team up, but there have been chances to team up before, and they haven't always gone after that. So, and I think that the run that the Suns have, it is repeatable, but unlike the East, which is a lot better than what it's used to be, there's still a lot of teams where you have to consider them. And as great as the run for Phoenix was, can they repeat with a Kawhi Leonard-led Clippers and Paul George, or go up against a Utah Jazz, which I assume will continue to be good? LeBron and the Lakers, for example, and even, the Nuggets, who are still, looking great. And were, even though they got swept by the Suns, they didn't have Jamal Murray, and they'll have another year to work on it. But as far as the Suns, I think they absolutely can continue this. I think Chris Paul will be very pivotal in making sure that happens, because Booker and Paul together create something dynamic. And is Booker at the level of Giannis? No, but that man still dropped 40 in the finals and willed his team to victories on multiple occasions and had a lot of fight. I don't think people should remember him for what he did in Game 6. This is not and this was his first, not just his first finals appearance, his first playoffs. You have James Jones, who's a great executive. You have Monty Williams, who's a great coach. You have young budding stars like Cam Johnson, who looks like he's going to be a problem. A big part of it will be if DeAndre Ayton can continue what he was able to do, or was this all because of Chris Paul, who he credited a lot? I'm not going to say that the Suns are done. I think that the Suns prove that they can be this team, and they have the right organization to continue this greatness. It just has to be about making the right moves and their guys continuing that progression rather than reverting back to what they were a year ago.
Sure. If they keep Chris Paul, in my opinion, I think they could get back there, and then it's repeatable because his leadership and the way that he, sees the floor is not, you're not going to get that anywhere else. And I hate to admit that, but I do. I just don't know that he's going to be there. If he's there, Matt, I agree with you. I think that they could do it again, but that's where my problem lies.
Well, and just one last thing, because we talked about it with the Bucks, but it's also true about the team that loses in the finals. It's tough, it's heartbreaking, but it usually pushes them to try and get back. And so you tend to see
teams. Typically, yes. If you're in our experience, because we have Giannis, he's one of one though. Chris Paul has been bouncing around trying to find that title. First, he went to Harden, it didn't work. Then he said, "Hey, let me try the young guy, Booker." That didn't work. He might just join his banana boat captain with LeBron James and try to get one there. And that's what I see happening.
Well, we've been hearing Scott, what do you think? You've been choosing the Suns. You've been high on the Suns the entire season, even before the season. Obviously,
right.
Both Luke and I have given credit to Monty Williams and James Jones, but you truly have been pushing the Suns. What are your thoughts on their future?
So I think both of you guys make a lot of good points. This is where I kind of see it. I side more towards Matt for this reason. The Phoenix Suns have a young core that I believe can make noise for years to come, so long as they continue to improve. Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges is a legitimate foursome in the NBA that can continue, obviously, to get better. And like I said, make some noise. And again, being coached by Monty Williams, James Jones, who just won Executive of the Year, they're going to continue to do the right things to push this organization, this franchise forward. And like I actually mentioned when I wrote about the Suns last summer, not knowing that Chris Paul would come to town, the Phoenix Suns had turned themselves into a spot that you would want to be if you're a superstar or a star. And again, it does get better than Chris Paul. He's a 36-year-old, 6-foot point guard who, again, we all agree is great, a future Hall of Famer. But there are stars that you can plug into Phoenix that are going to be better than Chris Paul. And again, you pair that with a bona fide superstar in Devin Booker, young pieces who will hopefully continue to get better with a great coach and a great front office. I can see the Phoenix Suns being, one of the top 4 teams in the Western Conference for years to come, whether CP3 is there or not. So that's how I kind of feel about the Suns, their future. I think they're set up as well as anybody across the league, if you ask me.
Sure, absolutely, for sure. And just to wrap it up, because it came to my mind as I was sitting here listening to you guys reflect, but I think that the Suns, without Chris Paul, are going to be a Portland Trailblazers type team. The Damian Lillard, Devin Booker comparison, then your next man, Ayton, McCollum, hot or cold type guys. I think that's where I see them. They'd be middle of the pack in the West. So that's where we're at. And we'll see. We'll see when that time comes. But as we wrap up, what does this mean, the Milwaukee Bucks being NBA Finals champions? What does this mean for other small market teams? Is it giving them hope? What does it mean, Matt? What do you think?
Well, I think it just shows that blueprint is usable. It just is about getting the right people. A perfect example, you just brought it up, Luke, the Portland Trailblazers. Obviously, Damian Lillard is an iconic, once in a lifetime kind of generational talent. It's just that Chris Middleton has worked out better than CJ McCollum as far as the number 2, and building the rest of the team around them. The Portland Trailblazers have been a great team, and they've stepped up. They made it to a Western Conference Finals, but they just cannot continue to repeat that. And it's because the rest of the team around them does not seem to always step up when Dame needs them to step up. So I think that it shows that it can be done, and you can build your team around one true superstar with some all-stars and other players around that help and are great role players. But it really does, and Phoenix too, for that matter. It's the same thing, but it really has to be top to bottom greatness throughout the organization. You look at Phoenix, they have an Executive of the Year. Monty Williams, I thought, should have been Coach of the Year. The Bucks, you had John Horst, who was an Executive of the Year. Mike Budenholzer has been a multiple-time Coach of the Year. And so you need those sort of things. You can't get by if you aren't hitting everything, almost not perfectly, but pretty dang close. And so you look at a team like the Grizzlies is a good example too. John Morant looks like he could be that type of player. Now it's about Memphis putting the right pieces around him to where they can hit on everything. And yeah, it also takes a little bit of luck, maybe some injuries and whatnot, but that is beside the point. small markets can do great things, but you need buy-in at every level. And that's also the ownership, because the ownership for the Milwaukee Bucks, credit to them. They came in on day one with this new ownership and we're like, if you don't believe we can win a title, you need to leave right now, because that is what we are here to do. And almost 5 years to the day, they do that. So absolutely, this is hope for small markets, but it just shows that you need to have a seriousness that is a little higher than maybe some of the bigger market teams have.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, and I'm a bit torn on my answer because, man, I'm with you that, small markets should, be energized by what they've seen the Milwaukee Bucks accomplish over the last, month or so. Again, and one of the main reasons is Milwaukee has been deemed a small market. And I think we saw evidence in the last couple of days, 80,000 fans outside of Pfizer Forum. It's not so small as a market as many people like to think, but I'm not sure what the Milwaukee Bucks have done is super repeatable from the standpoint of why are they here? They're here because they hit the lottery in drafting Giannis Antetokounmpo. Not many franchises are going to be lucky enough to make the right decision, draft the right guy, draft a future superstar or future first ballot Hall of Famer, and have him actually develop and, reach, his peak and what he can be. So, and again, I also think of the Dallas Mavericks, who Dallas obviously isn't a small market, but they have a bona fide superstar in Luka Doncic, who you can argue that Giannis is probably, head and shoulders better than Luka, but the gap isn't massive. Luka, in my opinion, is still a top 5, top 6 player in this league, but we're not looking at the Dallas Mavericks, as legitimate title contenders, even, with, that superstar there. So it takes a village, as you mentioned, Matt. And again, it starts with having that generational superstar, it seems to me, in this league for a small market or for really any team across the league.
Yeah.
And I don't think that process is super repeatable.
Yeah, Matt, Scott, I'm on your side there. This honestly doesn't give much to the small markets because the Bucks, like you mentioned, they drafted generational talent, a guy who we're talking about being in the GOAT debate at the end of his career. That happens once in a century type thing. Like that's, and they just won a championship because of that. Their first one, and he's been there for 8 years.
Right.
So the odds of that happening in another small market are very slim. And if it does happen again, it's very unlikely that a franchise is lucky enough to get a guy who has this next level unheard of loyalty. True. You might draft a guy like the Grizzlies. You mentioned John Morant. They got John Morant. He's great, but he might never hit his peak in Memphis. He might just go elsewhere because, he's going to see that he can't get it done there, like a lot of guys tend to do. And Giannis has that traditionalist loyalty that is just unheard of in this day and age because guys want to get that ring and they want to do it fast. So for that to happen elsewhere is unlikely. And that's why it's such a good story. That's why we're sitting here talking about it. So small markets shouldn't be too excited about anything, but it does show you that winning can happen anywhere. It does show you that. It shows that cities that aren't considered as good are sometimes the hidden gems. It gives hopes to these places, and I think it's great for the league. And I think at the very least, it'll get, franchises and their fans stirring and excited for the next season and considering what could be if they were just lucky enough to get that pick. So it definitely just drives up the interest in the league when guys like Giannis are leading their teams to finals and a city like Milwaukee is on the top. But that's all the time we have here today on Chalk Talk. From myself, Scott Procter, and Matt Morris, thanks for tuning in. If you are in Milwaukee and attending the championship parade Thursday morning, have fun, be safe, and we will see you here next week.
Bucks and 6.